Greetings and Assalamu alaikum. My name is Shwa and I'm the host and founder of this podcast called Light Up with Shwa. Today is a special on Kashmir. I have Arshad Iqbal, who was born and brought up in Srinagar, Kashmir, and he is currently living in Massachusetts for approximately 18 years with his family. He will briefly talk about the history of Kashmir and the current dire situation there. I will also put links on Kashmir so you can educate and learn about the history and its current situation. You will also notice there is no introductory music and there is no ending music today that I usually play for this podcast. Instead, I will be playing a Kashmiri song with some pictures of women. And the first picture is Arshad Iqbal's mother's picture. So stay tuned and thank you for watching and listening.
My name is Arshad Iqbal Nisar, and I am an engineer by profession.
Okay.
I'm an electronics engineer by training. I have been working in Boston, greater Boston area, and doing mainly microprocessor circuit design hands. And also I like to teach. I am very much enthused by the STEM focus that should be in modern education. And it's all about engineering, and modern education has become so complicated. We definitely it must look into how to mentor and teach our younger generations so they are ready for college.
What do your children say about you being a father? Have they ever given you a feedback?
Well, they have. They won't just praise me at my face, but it seems that I do impress them a little bit because.
Okay.
They are very cooperative and very helpful to me in various ways. And it has come to a good happy medium. So they have acquired mostly the good of both worlds, so which has made me a happy father. I think it's by example mostly. If you are practicing what you preach, not saying that I'm the best person around, I have somehow tried to kind of keep that happy balance of things. So they have really learned from example, and I'm not the only person. It's my wife also. Her efforts go into it as well.
Were you not an authoritarian parent?
No, I was never
You're
an
a loving
authoritarian
father.
parent. I was
Would
a
you
loving
qualify
father
for that?
and very flexible also. And it's also a process of learning, because when you come from South Asia to US, your mind is embedded in that that kind of culture.
More
so
disciplined
yes,
rules.
you try to do that, but that doesn't work. But then you learn other ways to kind of make that happen. Luckily, my parents also were not that authoritative back home. They were more like teachers to me. My mom was a great teacher to me, although she was not formally educated, but she knew the value of education, and she constantly inspired me to learn. Okay. I can't describe to you that without even knowing what physics means, without knowing even what science and engineering means, she would just pick up some terms and tell me, did you do your calculus? And my father was a math professor, and he was a great teacher. He was very revered by his students. He had this knack of trying to get the concepts across.
Back in Kashmir?
Back in Kashmir.
Okay.
He was a college professor.
And in occupied Kashmir, we have to differentiate, right?
Right. When you call off Kashmir, my Kashmir is Srinagar, Kashmir, which is the central part of the Kashmir Valley, which is where the Kashmir Valley is, where I was born and raised, and received my education to a good part. And I worked there also as a teacher, as a lecturer in the engineering school before I came here. They were short on staff, and they liked my credentials, so they employed me for a few years. And that was in the sensitive period from 1990 to 96. When we know what has happened in Kashmir.
Yes.
So my eldest son is 24 years old. My younger is 23 years old.
Okay.
They were just born 1 year apart.
Oh, no, they're pretty close.
Yes.
There, so they have a good company, and do they have a good relationship?
Yes, there's not much sibling rivalry, and they complement each other.
Okay.
Anyways.
That's very good. What about your relationship? How friendly are they? Are they open to you? Do they come to you?
They definitely are more open to their mom.
Okay.
But
right.
to sometimes it depends. My elder is very open to me.
Okay.
And the younger is very balanced in what he reveals or doesn't.
Okay.
But they always are very emotionally connected to me. So when it's an emotional matter, they're always with me, and they always relate to me.
That's very nice. in America?
No, unfortunately, I don't have both my parents,
Okay.
and my mom passed away in 1985.
Oh, okay.
It was long, long ago, and I was just barely into my mid-teens or late teens.
Oh, okay.
That taught me a lot. So, but my mom had taught me everything even before that. She almost knew it that she won't be there when I will grow up, and I still carry that her memories with me, and her teachings and her love and affection, which is it still is with me, always will be with me, and her wisdom. And I lost my father 10 years after my mom passed away in 1995.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I lost my father right in the middle
Quite young.
of what was
Yeah.
going on in Kashmir.
Okay.
It's kind of
So let's
sad.
talk about that. Okay,
Yeah.
what is the issue going on in Kashmir? So you are a Kashmiri born, brought up in occupied Kashmir. People don't know much about Kashmir here in America. So what can you teach us?
Certainly, people don't know a lot about Kashmir, and unfortunately, it's a very chronic issue. It's been going on for a long time, and Kashmir has a history of repression and tyranny that goes even before 1947. That complicates it actually. So if you capture the history of Kashmir, and if you don't want to go too deep and too long ago, you could just start from the Treaty of Amritsar. So when Kashmiris were sold by the British to Gulab Singh, without the Kashmiris knowing that they were sold, there has been a betrayal. So in the Kashmiri psyche, a Kashmiri feels that he has been betrayed at every step. That's the sad part is the Kashmiri himself was never a person who was violent, who was a troublemaker, but trouble has been made for the Kashmiri all around him by others who are not Kashmiris. So the British sold Kashmiris to Gulab Singh for a certain sum of money. And when Gulab Singh, who was not even of royal lineage, that's the thing, he was one of the chieftains of Ranjit Singh's army. So he deserted his master and invited the British. In a way, he was not a patriot. So he was an opportunist who bought Kashmir. And then he extracted all the money that he paid to the British from Kashmir by imposing heavy taxation. And because of that heavy taxation, Kashmiris became very poor, especially Kashmiri Muslims. Not to say that we want to distinguish between, it's often said, why do we divide Kashmiri Muslims, the Kashmiris into Kashmiri Muslims
But
and
it is
Kashmiri Brahmins?
majority.
But the majority are, of course, majority are Kashmiri Muslim.
Okay.
But during the rule of the Maharaja of Kashmir, it was the smaller percentage of people, which is the Kashmiri Pandits, who were in the revenue system, who were in the tax collecting system. There's actually a book written by Sir Walter Lawrence.
Okay.
He wrote this book around in 1880s. So he was the settlement commissioner of Kashmir. He was appointed by the Maharaja or the East India Company, one of those two.
Okay.
So what happened in Kashmir, because of this heavy taxation, Kashmiris became very poor, to the point that Kashmiris started dying. The Maharaja was really worried that the whole people might die, and who's going to pay taxes? Who's going to work in the fields? It was the majority Kashmiri Muslims who were the peasants, the people who were doing the labor class, who were working in the fields, who were basically the workhorses of the economy, and they were dying. There was famine, and it was because of this heavy taxation, and there was a lot of corruption in this taxation system, which Sir Walter Lawrence talks about in his book. And he particularly points his finger at the group of revenue officials, which were mostly comprised of the Kashmiri Pandits. And they, you just read his book. And because of this heavy taxation system, which was very unfair, even the Maharaja of Kashmir, he thought if he brings in this, he basically talked to the British. He said, hey, what do I do about this? People are dying, there's heavy taxation, because the tax code was corrupted by the people who were the tax collectors in their favor. It was biased. So he brought in, so the East India Company, or the Viceroy, British Viceroy who was in Delhi, he recommended to him that let's send you a settlement commissioner who will look into the revenue system and who will straighten the books. So that's what Sir Walter Lawrence did. And while doing that, he clearly observed that what was going on. There's no better source to us than Sir Walter Lawrence, because he looked in the revenue books. So what was going on against Kashmiris, in general, the poor Kashmiris. If you read those passages, it makes me tearful to see what has happened to our people, how we have been taken advantage of. And then things improved a bit, but then it did not, the main problem that was there, the Kashmiris were living in sort of a slavery. under the Dogra regime, which was the Maharaja Hari Singh, who were, they still, the taxation was not like things didn't improve that much. And in 1931 there was an uprising, a movement for independence of Kashmir. So that's what the old history is. But then fast forwarding to 1947, we know the history of partition. Many people have read it. He had tried hard not to let India partition. Whereas the other picture that you get from the Indian side is, oh no, he just wanted partition. That's all he wanted. No, he had tried other ways.
Actually, it is in the history.
Yeah, his 14 points. Jinnah's 14 points are very famous, and Motilal Nehru did not even accept a single point. This is the students of history should read that very well. How Jinnah tried to.
We don't know our history actually.
They say Jinnah wept only twice. When his wife died, and when his 14 points were outright rejected by the Motilal Nehru family. And rest is history. But coming back to Kashmir, many people will say that Kashmir is the unresolved business of partition. Some will call it a festering sore of partition. It's a festering sore of partition. Think about it. If there were no Kashmir dispute between India and Pakistan, wouldn't these countries be friendly?
Exactly.
So the Kashmiri Muslims, which were the majority in Kashmir, I'll tell you exactly what happened. So from a Kashmiri point of view, a Kashmiri Muslim had not really being under this taxation system, being in literal slavery, slaving away for the Maharaja, making money for him. Kashmiris had not traveled the world, had not known what's going outside. So in contrast to that, the Kashmiri Pandits, who were the elite of the Kashmiris, they were everywhere in India. They were plugged into the political happenings. So they knew this is coming, a partition is coming. So where would Kashmir go?
Yeah.
And in all good sense, a majority Muslim, areas went to Pakistan. So this place could go to Pakistan. So there was a very concerted effort on part of those people who basically lobbied Jawaharlal Nehru, who himself was a descendant of the Kashmiri Pandits. So they really played their cards very well for their own sake, So they dissuaded this general pop. So that's how they planned. Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah in the meantime was a leader of Kashmiris. And Kashmiris looked upon him as an educated person who had been educated at Aligarh. And he was the potential leader, or he was the leader, a charismatic leader. So Nehru played a card. He tried to entice Sheikh Abdullah, and he basically told him, you are a Kashmiri, I'm a Kashmiri, religion doesn't matter, India is a secular country. These were the things told to him. We will give you great autonomy, we will make you almost independent. Why go with Pakistan? And in those scheme of things, I don't know what was going on in Sheikh Abdullah's mind, but he was not really thinking about future as a shrewd statesman. He got carried over by these promises that Nehru made to him. And it was, in all fairness, it was not fair to Kashmiri Muslims because they were not politically mature, well, not even aware of what's going on to an extent, except some of the elite, some of the elders like Sheikh Abdullah and all. But even those people were kind of taken over by Nehru's, rhetoric, Nehru's like temptations. You will be sort of an independent prime minister of Kashmir. That's what he made him, the prime minister of Kashmir.
Yep.
And not to speak that within a few years he arrested him, right? So he made a lot of promises. Nehru made a lot of promises to Kashmir. As the Prime Minister of India, he made those promises, none of which has been kept, as we know now. None of which has been kept.
And this is over a span of?
This happens from even before 1947. Nehru tries to what do you call this? For lack of words, he tries to strike a friendship with Sheikh Abdullah. And we know that Jinnah was not the kind of person who would go up and try to cozy up or try to flatter anyone, right? That was the difference. Nehru was a flatterer, and Jinnah was not. Had Jinnah chosen that path, he could have flattered Sheikh Abdullah, but he was a simple, direct, honest man in that sense. And Nehru, on the other hand, was a flatterer. So Nehru engaged in flattery. He flattered Sheikh Abdullah. And he visited and met him many times even before 1947. So it was all planned that the majority Kashmiri Muslims, who follow Sheikh Abdullah, who take him as a leader. When the leader is in your pocket, what will the rest of the people do?
Yep.
That's how it was planned, and it was executed that way. But there was a Maharaja of Kashmir also in question, because there was another clause Like the Nizam of Hyderabad wanted to accede to Pakistan. He was not allowed because it was said that this is this a part of land is not even connected to Pakistan. What kind of country will it make? That kind of logic was used there. Here, the logic was, if they used the same logic, it would have been much better. So they instead tried to cajole the Maharaja Hari Singh also to come to their side. So then we know there was some of the Punchis, some of the tribals, they rose up in rebellion against Maharaja Hari Singh because it was not known what Maharaja Hari Singh would really do. In his book, Alistair Lamb, is an English author. In his book, he basically mentions that it is not that the tribals rose up in rebellion and then there was a reaction and then the Indian forces came to Kashmir. To some extent, it looks like almost the people, the Patiala regiment, other forces who came into Kashmir at that point were almost ready. They were almost ready. It was not like they had to be prepared. It was not a reaction. It was like this happened, therefore this happened the very next day. If you look at it, and as I have read it and as I have understood it, it was like there's a famous film, Bollywood film, in which there is a character called Haider. He calls it Chupza. Chupza is a Hebrew term for a sudden attack, a sudden, overturning of things. So it was a chupza. So that's what happened to Kashmir. So they just, it was planned, every party was planning, but these people were smarter and they kind of, the day was probably sometime in September or October of 1947 when the Indian Army was airlifted, and airlifted in a big way to Kashmir. Ostensibly saying that the tribals had come from the other side, whereas there was a rebellion going on in that area also. The Maharaja Hari Singh was not trusted by people who were in Punj or who were living in the tribal areas, and rightly so, because nobody knew what he would do, because he had signed a standstill agreement with Pakistan, no doubt, but there are reports that the hardline Hindu RSS people were talking to him and asking him to accede to India, and basically planning for that, as we see what happened, within weeks. And the Patiala regiment troops were ready. The airlifting was conducted. The planes were made ready. India didn't have an air force that time. How did all that happen? So, and the timing is very suspicious. When was the accession? When was the article of accession allegedly signed by the Maharaja of Kashmir, and when did the army land? So there's a whole lot of cloudiness there. But long story short, Kashmiri Muslims were surprised by all this, and we were not really taken into account or even asked, like the Treaty of Amritsar. This was done the same way. And then when it was done, it was Lord Mountbatten, the Viceroy of India, who told Nehru, what have you done? What are you doing? So take this to United Nations, because it said that Lord Mountbatten had this feeling that, something bad had happened, that forces had been airlifted into Kashmir, whereas, no due regard to the will of the people there was, no due attention was paid. So he said, take this to United Nations, and that's when this plebiscite thing came up. And Nehru has broadcasted, actually he has made a very clear statement many times. He said, I even remember the word, he said something like this: Kashmir is not the property of India or Pakistan, it is the property of Kashmiris, and Kashmiris will decide what to do with their, as we call the right of self-determination. And one thing after another thing, this right of self-determination was always kept away from Kashmir. It is a big tragedy. Actually, the world should wake up to this. Just look at what has happened to Kashmir. We've been going from one phase to another, and every time this rightful, this right of self-determination, and every nation in the world, every people in the world have a right to determine politically how they will organize themselves. And Kashmir was a place that was even before the partitioning of India. Right? It was a state with a sovereign state, which no regard to the people of Kashmir was paid ever, and it's been going on and on and on since then. We know about Sheikh Abdullah while he was made the Prime Minister of Kashmir from 1947 onwards till 1953. He was arrested in 1953. So it is said, how the relations soared between him and Delhi. Just because he tried to assert himself as the Prime Minister of Kashmir, all that was promised to him was slowly taken away. And then when they thought he's unmanageable or he's becoming too assertive, they put him in jail. Had gone on a vacation. And my father puts it very nicely when he used to relate to me. Sheikh Abdullah went for a vacation on a weekend to Gulmarg. Gulmarg is a hill station in Kashmir. And then when he was just there, an Indian army officer came, "Sir, you are under arrest." So this big Sheikh Abdullah, who is thinking himself to be the king of Kashmir, is gone. He's reduced to nothing, and he was bundled away in a probably a hill station, health resort, rest house, where he was kept house arrested. That was his jail, and that place was somewhere between Jammu and Srinagar. So he was not kept in the valley; he was taken outside the valley. Just like the old Mughal kings, like Bahadur Shah Zafar, was taken to Rangoon, far away from his capital. Same thing was done to Sheikh Abdullah to break him, And while this was done, a rebel within his party was already prepared, who basically backstabbed Sheikh Abdullah, so that the government was also kept intact. He just took the position of Sheikh Abdullah. So his name was Bakshi Ghulam Muhammad. So from that onwards, what India did, it arranged puppets. It arranged another person to take after a certain person. So this chain of the puppets of Delhi's rule in Kashmir continued, and most of them are in jail right now. They've been arrested. Sheikh Abdullah's son Farooq Abdullah has been arrested. His grandson Umar Abdullah, who was the chief minister of Kashmir, has been arrested. Mehbooba Mufti, who was the daughter of Mufti Muhammad Said, is arrested. So many of their party officials are also arrested. And, really, for Kashmir, it is too much.
What would you say to the Hindu people in US and Massachusetts, those who are trying to rationalize as if this is what Kashmiris want? Oh, the Kashmiris are very happy with this
revocation of Article 370.
370. And totally taking away the autonomy of
I would
Kashmir.
ask those people, just to be a little bit honest, it's very sad sometimes that even some very polished, educated people can be so racist. You just have to go back to Nazi Germany. In Germany, when the Nazi Party came to power, the Germans, who were very racist at that time, some of them were great scientists. Germany was full of scientists. Germany was the center of science, culture, and technology of Europe when Hitler rose to power. And many of them, most of them were with Hitler. A good number were with Hitler. And, we see rest is history. Unfortunately, we are at the same juncture.
So there are some parallels with that.
So there are big parallels. And I would ask those great people, I know I had some professors who were Indian, great people. And I really admire them, And I'm sure there are some good Indians out there too who are thinking rationally.
Yeah.
But a good majority is not thinking rationally right now. First of all, they say that this was long overdue. Was it something special they had done for Kashmir? No. This was a promise they had made for Kashmir to come over, not consulting the Kashmiris, trying to be honest here. They just roped in Sheikh Abdullah and got the army in. After that, they were like the managers, the stage managers. As I said, there was a series of puppet regimes after that.
Yeah.
So we would never call it an accession in a real term. It was not the heart willing of a Kashmiri to be a part of the Indian Union. It is not that. That's why this dispute is festering. It is not Pakistan causing it from across the border. There is debate, but I would say internally inside Kashmir, Kashmiris have never felt a part of India for many reasons. And to say that suddenly this was long overdue and something great has been done, why have the people of Kashmir then been put under clampdown for last 6 weeks now? Why not? If people are happy, why not let them enjoy in streets? I have not been. There is a draconian curfew. There's how they're managing it is, anytime there is a protest, what I have gotten the sense of, talking to people, and I have not been able to talk to many people. It's just
first you talk about your family. Have you been able to talk to anybody?
I have not been able to talk to any of my siblings except my sister, and that too I have been able to talk for 2 minutes. So what happens? They say in last 6 weeks, from August 4th, I would say that's when everything stopped working. From August 4th was probably the last text message I sent across. At that moment, I didn't even know it would last so long. So there was something in the air then, and something ominous, And then even the governor of Kashmir at that time, Satyapal Malik, the Delhi appointed, he said, everything will be fine, nothing is going to happen. And he was lying, basically. He knew it all. And we knew it always from as I said, people are not plugged into it. It was well planned. Mehbooba Mufti and Omar Abdullah at the last moment had some epiphany, some thought that we should do something good for Kashmir, and they tried to come together to stake a claim to the government. And they sent a message to the governor of Kashmir. You know what he said? Oh, I didn't receive this message. Why? My fax machine was not working. So this is like a proverbial, it's a fax machine that changed the course of history. No, it was all planned. He must have received it, most likely. And he didn't want a government to form because they had to do this. You could not do this if there was not governor's rule. So they wanted that governor's rule to be imposed and to be kept imposed, and through that all this was done. If there was so I was at a talk at Harvard school, and the talk was given. There was a panel of people, and one of them was a very prominent political scientist who is a professor at Brown University in the United States. He's of Indian origin. He's supposedly a hawk, but when he spoke, he even acknowledged that this was a very undemocratic thing that was done to Kashmir. And not only undemocratic, it was done in a Machiavellian way, meaning, as you call in Urdu or Hindi, you say chal kapat karna, to trick somebody. It's a tragedy, what they have done. With all that has been done in Kashmir, hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris have been killed. The total death toll of Kashmiris stands at about 95,000, have been killed since 1989, since when militancy started. Which is another story. People will ask, why did militancy start in Kashmir? What were the reasons? And there are interesting things that people don't know. The thing is that we had an election in Kashmir in 1987. So while this was happening since the arrest of Sheikh Abdullah, after 20 years, he signed another set of papers with Indira Gandhi, with effectively diluting the autonomy of Kashmir, and from one puppet regime to another puppet regime. I'm sorry, they're all puppets, basically. We see it now. But finally, what happened is, at some point in 1987, Kashmiri people thought enough is enough, and they tried to hold on to the rope of Indian democracy. They wanted an election which was fair, which was not full of these parties which were basically subservient to Delhi, or had patched up with Delhi for any ulterior motive. They wanted a party that represented Kashmiris. So they formed a party called Muslim United Front. Honestly, that party was not what you think of Muslim in the sense fundamentalist or something, fire breathing or some, what's the typical stereotypes they have made up. They were great people. They were nice people. Yes, there was a good component of Jamaat-e-Islami in that. But they were all for, they had taken an oath on Indian Constitution and come to the democratic fold. And that whole election, I was not a child at that time. I was a adolescent. So I have seen that election with my own eyes when everybody voted for Muslim United Front, and the election was turned. Meaning the announcement was made, a person A won the election, but they announced a person B. So they said Farooq Abdullah won the election, whereas hardly any votes must have gone to Farooq Abdullah at that time.
So have there ever been a government elected by the will of the people?
There have been couple elections where they think, I don't know which one they say, but all along, maybe once or twice, the elections have been relatively fair, but still there were issues in that election because the parties that were there, the candidates that were there, there's never been a free and fair election in Kashmir. Okay. And 1987 was the worst. And you know what they did after that? That's where I'm coming to militancy.
Yes.
In militancy, it did not just happen on its own. So what happened is, after the election completed, the people who were the election agents, the polling agents who count the votes, who are there when who were from Muslim United Front Party, they were arrested. They were beaten up by the police. It was like, how dare you rise up against the great National Conference? National Conference was Farooq Abdullah's party. So after they rigged the elections, they snatched all the democratic norms were violated. After that, these election agents were imprisoned. They were beaten. They were subject to torture. I know this, for a fact. And then after that, these young men said, now we're going to teach India a lesson. These were the first people who went across and got weapons training. You know what we know in the part of what was Afghan war also, and all that happened, and they were the first militants of Kashmir. Their names are on our fingertips. Yasin Malik, who has been, by the way, arrested currently. Ashfaq Majid Wani, the person who heads Hizbul Mujahideen, you know, his name was Master Asandar. He was not. It's a name he has taken. You know, forgot his name currently. What it is? It's Salahuddin, Sayyid Salahuddin. But he was actually Master Asandar, and he was an election agent. He was involved with the polls. So these people were shocked. So that's what Kashmir, when Kashmir has been subject to a great shock, you know, the repercussions are not good. You know, we have this militancy that started then, which, you know, has been going on and has reduced to a large extent, I would say. I've been hearing from Indian Army people they're saying that there's not more than 80 militants in Kashmir. For the last 5 years, we've been hearing this. At some points, they will say, oh, militancy is over in Kashmir. There are not more than 80 militants in Kashmir. Fine, but then why do you have 1 million army in Kashmir?
Yeah.
So that does not, you know, so we're not getting an accurate idea of what has been going on, an accurate picture of, you know, it's all clouded, muddied, and sometimes we fear that somebody's manipulating it, you know.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. My pleasure. It was nice to have you here.
Na